I want to tell you a story about a country that most of you have never heard of. The story of Biafra. Biafra was a partially recognized country in southeastern Nigeria that was formed as a result of a secessionist movement by the ethnic group of the Igbo, after they went through a series of massacres inflicted upon them by the Nigerian military government. The secession of the eastern region of Nigeria by the Igbos to create their own state of Biafra led to the outbreak of a brutal war between Nigeria and Biafra that lasted for 4 agonizing years. This is what came to be known as the Nigerian Civil War, or popularly known in Nigeria as the Biafran War. The war led to the displacement of more than 4 million people from their homes and the death of close to 2 million civilians, majority of them dying as a result of starvation. The questions that arise about this war is that why will the military of a country use its weapons meant to protect its own people, use them against the people they swear to protect, and how starvation was used as a favorite tool of weapon by the Nigerian military government to quash the uprising. The country of Nigeria is very diverse. It is the most populated African nation with a populace of over 200 million people. This is a nation that is made up of more than 250 ethnic groups with over 500 languages spoken. Nigeria's main ethnic groups comprise of 3. The Hausa Fulani in the north, majority being Muslims, the famous Yoruba in the west, and the Igbos in the east, both majorities being Christians. Understanding these cultural and religious differences, it is what will help us understand the political crisis that occurred in Nigeria between 1966 up to 1970. Just like any other African country, Nigeria was under colonial rule by the Europeans. Or in its case, it was the British, who ruled the nation for 99 years until granting it independence in 1960.
In handing over the documents to the Federal Prime Minister, Alhaji Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Her Royal Highness handed over sovereignty to a new nation.
Soon after gaining independence, cracks began to emerge within the political structure of the young nation. The first civilian-led government of Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, who hailed from the ethnic group of the Hausa Fulani, was known to be extremely corrupt, and people never liked how his ethnic group dominated the government. This status quo prompted a section of the Nigerian army comprising of soldiers from the Yoruba, the Igbo, and some from the Hausa to forcibly overthrow the elected civilian government. The coup was carried out on January 15, 1966. It led to the death of 22 individuals. Majority of them were politicians and army officers from the Hausa Fulani. Prime Minister Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was among the casualties. However, the coup plotters were unsuccessful in taking over the government. They were overpowered by loyalist forces of the army that was led by the Nigerian Army Commander, General Johnson Agui Ironsi, just 2 days after the coup had started.
The coup now begins to look more and more like a straightforward military revolt against corruption in government, and one that's likely to last. It has popular backing. What's not so clear is who its real backers are. The man at present being put forward is the army commander, General Agui Ironsi, who arrived at the heavily guarded Parliament buildings to hold the new administration's first press conference.
The federal military government in Nigeria has taken over the administration of the country. Functions of the federal military government will be exercised by the Supreme Military Council, and details of which will be announced later.
The nature of events that took place during the coup and after the coup led to speculations that Ironsi himself had it all planned out. The reasoning behind it was that the majority of the perpetrators of the coup were of Igbo origin, and Ironsi himself, being an Igbo, never punished any of the coup perpetrators after he took over the government. Among the 22 individuals who were killed during the coup, only one was an Igbo. This coup was described as an Igbo coup. The other ethnic groups, particularly the Hausa Fulani, saw it as an attempt by the Igbos to consolidate power amongst themselves. They would not sit around and watch this happen. The Northerners quickly started planning a counterattack of their own that would avenge the death of their colleagues. After being in power for only 6 months, Ironsi was ousted and killed in a bloody counter-coup by the Northerners.
I want to make it quite clear again at this conference that Nigeria is and will remain constitutionally one country until the wishes of the people have been fully ascertained and the form of future association they desire.
This counter-coup was a silent declaration of war against the Igbos. What followed between June and December of 1966 was a series of killings carried out and sponsored by Hausa Fulani soldiers and officers of the Nigerian military government against the Igbos. A lot of the Igbos who were killed during this period were those who lived in the north. Estimates show that the pogroms left close to 30,000 Igbos dead, and more than 1 million of them fleeing their homes in the north and sought refuge to the Igbo-dominated eastern region. The military governor of the eastern region, General Chukwuemeka Ojukwu, an Igbo himself, having witnessed the atrocities carried out against his own people, he seceded the eastern region of Nigeria and declared it as the Republic of Biafra, leading to an automatic declaration of war by the Nigerian military government against Biafra. The first thing that the Nigerian military did was to enforce an air, land and sea blockade over Biafra. This meant that no food, no weapons, no medicine was allowed to enter Biafra. Secondly, they invaded the territory from two fronts, from the north and from the west. I want you to remember that this is Africa in the 60s. Warfare wasn't the same like that of the 6-Day War or the Vietnam War, where you had both sides were equipped with tanks and bombers. The war between Nigeria and Biafra was more like a guerrilla warfare. You know, the war of hit and run. The two were fighting over control of major roads, an airstrip and villages. There were no real front lines with dug-up trenches. At the start of the war, both sides were equally matched, until foreign powers like Britain, the Soviet Union, France and China intervened. Ironically, Britain and the Soviet Union supported the Nigerian army with heavy artillery and bombs. It was ironical because, remember, it was during the Cold War and the two were bitter adversaries.
Полевой столб, поднимающийся с земли, быстро увеличился в объеме. Через несколько секунд после взрыва диаметр полевого столба составлял около 10 километров.
While on the other hand, Biafra's army was financially supported and armed by China and France. Every other time that foreign countries intervened in any conflict in Africa, it was all about securing their interests. Britain's interest was to protect its oil investment. Britain's multinational oil companies, Shell and the British Petroleum Company, were already operating in Nigeria before the war, and Britain wanted to make sure that there was no disruption of their oil supply, since 30% of its oil came from Nigeria. France also had the same interest. They wanted Nigeria's oil that was located on the Biafran side. Meanwhile, for the Soviet Union and China, they had little to do with Nigerian oil. The two were interested in spreading their influence against each other. This was because of the gradual worsening of relations between the two. After 1.5 years of fighting, the war started to take a heavy toll on the Biafrans, specifically its citizens. Because of the blockade, the food that the Biafrans were growing themselves wasn't enough to sustain its population of close to 4 million people. It did not take a long time for videos and images of malnourished, sick and dead children to start spreading across Western Europe and the United States. Ojukwu allowed foreign media like the BBC to enter Biafra so as to document what he called a genocidal act by the Nigerian military against the Igbos.
At the beginning of the year, the war, perhaps the flight of 2 million people from the north, or perhaps 4.5 million refugees, came with used means of sustenance and slowly dying of starvation. At what stage does this become genocide?
The Biafran army also started to experience the effects of starvation. Morale amongst the hungry soldiers started going down. They started losing villages and streets consistently every month to the Nigerian army. The losses made Ojukwu paranoid of an attempt by his own army to oust him. This made him to start carrying out purges towards army battalions that lost ground to the Nigerians. Despite having a small air force that consisted of 6 old airplanes like the B-25s, the B-26, the Douglas DC-3 and the North American TC Texans, they did not provide the much air power that was needed to fight off the more than 30 Nigerian Ilyushin 28 bombers that grounded the Biafran villages. The distressing images of starving babies led to worldwide sympathy amongst the Christian community and condemnation towards the Muslim-dominated Nigerian military government. More than 30 Christian NGOs, the likes of the Joint Church Aid, started to mobilize their resources and flew in relief food, doctors and medicine from neighboring states of Sao Tome, Equatorial Guinea and Gabon towards Biafra. Although the Nigerian army had established an air blockade, the NGOs did not care. They deliberately flew in food and medicine during the night so as it would be hard for the Nigerian Air Force to spot and shoot down the cargo planes. But despite the effort, some planes were shot down that killed a total of 29 pilots and some aid workers throughout the airlift period. By 1969, as the war was nearing its end, over 250 metric tons of food was flown in every night to the estimated 1.5 to 2 million Biafrans who were in need. Despite China and France abandoning Biafra during the war that led to the shortage of weapons and resources, the Biafran army was able to make weapons of its own by using scrap metal and weapons seized from the Nigerians, and held out a stiff resistance against the Nigerians for 3 years until their final demise on January 7, 1970. This made General Ojukwu to flee into exile by plane into the Ivory Coast in fear of humiliation and execution by the Nigerian army, signaling the surrender of Biafra. Ojukwu's deputy Philippe Effiong signed and handed over the surrender papers on January 14, 1970 to Yakubu Gowon, marking the end of the civil war.
Is the fighting now at an end?
I can rarely say so. I'm absolutely sure of that, unless, as I've said, unless we are provoked, unless, of course, our troops are fired at. And I'm absolutely convinced they will not fire at anyone, they will not shoot at anybody, unless, if they are attacked. You may hear reports of that, but you can rest assured it will not have been started by the federal government troops.
The Biafran War was a product of the ethnic biasness that was present among Nigerian society. Innocent men, women, and children of Igbo origin suffered heavily as a result of the hatred between the two groups. Was it not for the Christian NGOs that came to the aid of the starving and disease-ridden civilians, more graves would have been dug up. This war was a culmination of events that added up together, resulting to the demise of members of the Igbos and the Hausas, with the Igbos taking a huge toll. 55 years on, there are signs among the Igbo people that the past wounds have never healed. Since Nigeria returned into full civilian rule in 1999, there has been limited clashes between the Nigerian police and Biafra nationalistic movements that still insist in the reinstatement of Biafra, and justice to be served towards the perpetrators of the Biafran war crimes.
My name is Francis Abang.
Francis, I will look at me.
Francis Abang.
Francis Abang?
Yes, sir.
Where are you from?
I'm from Boki, Ogoja.
Ogoja?
Yes, sir.
So how do you happen to be in the uniform?
I was forced to join the Ojukwu soldiers.
Oh, you are forced to fight Ojukwu soldiers?
Yes, sir.
Who forced you?
Ojukwu rebel soldiers forced me to join them when I returned from Lagos.
You returned from Lagos?
Yes, sir.
To go where? To go Ogoja?
When I returned from Lagos to my home.
Oh, to your home?
Yes, sir, to escort my wife.
To escort your wife from where?
From Lagos to...
Oh, yes. You escort your wife from Lagos to Ogoja?
Ogoja. So I was forced to join army. So we have been demanded for a state. And they suspect me that as I returned from Lagos, I may carry anything back to Lagos again because I was hurried to go back to Lagos. Some of my brothers are now in detention.
Yeah.
They are struggling for state.